Hello and welcome to Radio Waves. I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. We're broadcasting out of WLBE Real Country, 790 AM out of Leesburg, Florida. And if you're watching us on television, you're doing so on Lake Sumter TV, Comcast Channel 13, Spectrum 498, and Prism Channel 83. So today I get to answer a lifelong question, I'm embarrassed to say. I've invited our clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller for Lake County, Mr. Gary Cooney, to go over with us exactly what that role does, maybe a little bit about himself, what he does, to give us a clear picture, just exactly what the importance of this role is. Gary, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Kris. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. I did a little bit of research beforehand. You know, I'm surprised. I can't believe the amount of responsibilities that the clerk of the circuit courts actually has, because it just sounds like the clerk at the courthouse, and
Right.
That's really not it.
It is not. It is not. We have 5 constitutional overarching responsibilities. So we are the clerk of the circuit and county court. We are the comptroller for the county. We are the internal auditor for the county. We are the official record keeper for the county, and we are the ex officio record keeper, if you will, secretary for the Board of County Commissioners.
Now, there's a lot of questions I want to ask.
All right.
But the record keeping part of this.
Sure.
And maybe we can kind of segue into the history of just the clerk's role as well, because I found that, oddly enough, I know we're talking about a dry government position,
Right.
but it's really, really interesting to me exactly what kind of record keeping we're talking about.
So, and it has evolved over the years, you might imagine.
Yeah.
So go back with me in time to the early 1800s. And so in 1821, we cease being a Spanish territory and we become a United States territory. And President James Monroe...
We being Florida.
We being Florida. And President James Monroe taps Andrew Jackson to become our first territorial governor. And Jackson, in March of 1821, takes over as territorial governor. But he says to Monroe, I will only serve as territorial governor until such time as I establish a government, and then I'm out of here. And true to his word, he was very term limited. He left in November of 1821 after he got the government established. But one of the first things that he did was appoint a clerk of the court. And that sounds like a really odd appointment.
It does.
But if you think about the time, so in the state of Florida, if you research your deed back to its original roots, you're going to find the original Spanish land grants. And so you have a United States territory now taking over from Spanish governors who don't want to give it up. Spanish governors in charge in Florida.
Right.
And so Jackson comes along, and today we have 67 counties, and when Jackson comes along, there were 2. There was East Florida and West Florida. East Florida was St. Johns County, which we still have, which is the home, as you might imagine, of St. Augustine.
Sure.
And West Florida was Escambia County, which is the home of Pensacola. So you had East and West Florida, Escambia and St. Johns County. And he appointed 2 court clerks. He appointed Bird C. Willis in St. Johns County and appointed John Miller in Escambia County. And they were charged with getting all of the property records from the Spanish governors, even under threat of arrest. In fact, one of those clerks had one of the governors arrested, brought to the Capitol, and was forced to give up the deeds.
Is that right?
And so part of our job still today, and maybe the most important part, if you don't want to become a third world country, is to have property ownership.
Right.
And it was to secure those deeds. And that's what we still do for the citizens of Lake County to this very day.
So our records go back to the inception of the state of Florida.
Correct. And in Lake County...
It's just amazing. It blows my mind.
In Lake
really
County,
does.
we actually go back a little further in our records than the establishment of Lake County. So Lake County was established by the legislature in 1887. And interestingly enough, one of the members of that legislature and one of the ones who was pushing for the establishment of Lake County became the first clerk of Lake County, a guy named H.H. Duncan. And Mr. Duncan had been, he sort of did it in a little bit of reverse order. He had been a state senator for a couple of terms, and then he moved to the House of Representatives. And it was while he was in the House of Representatives in 1887 that Lake County became a county. But our deed records go back to 1884 because we need for our property records to have the records from Orange County and Sumter County, and because those are the two counties from which we were formed. So it took
Right.
parts of Sumter County and parts of Orange County. They made Lake County. They established Lake County itself. And in that legislation, they established a clerk of the court, which was Mr. Duncan.
Mm-hmm.
They established a supervisor of elections, which became very interesting for Lake County because the supervisor of elections' first task was to have the voters pick a county seat, which led to an interesting part of Lake County's history. There were 3 cities that were vying for that title: Leesburg, Tavares, and a city that you probably never heard of, Bloomfield. And so Bloomfield was a little city that was out where Yalaha is, in that same general area. And it had 3 very powerful gentlemen who were hoping to have their city, if you will, become the county seat. There were 3 elections held, and ultimately at the end of the 3rd election, Tavares was selected. But the gentleman in Bluefield was not very happy about that. He appealed that decision. And at the same time, Mr. Duncan and some of his compatriots from Tavares rode across Lake Harris, took all the records that Bloomfield had, and hid them in a general store in Tavares until the appeal played out and Tavares became the county seat.
That's amazing. And it's been the county seat
Ever
since.
And Mr. Duncan was the original clerk, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
He took office in 1887, and he served until his death in office in 1920. And we had an unusual thing happen then. At that point in time, the clerk of the court was paid more than the sheriff, and the then sheriff, a guy named T.C. Smith. So if you go to Peyton's office, if you go to Sheriff Grinnell's office
Mm-hmm.
and look on his wall, and you come to my office and look on my wall, you'll see the same picture of the same gentleman, T.C. Smith, because he was sheriff at the time, and he became the clerk to earn a little bit higher salary. And he served from 1920 until 1927 as the clerk of the court.
That's amazing.
So that's a little bit of fun history of Lake County and the clerk of the court in Lake County as it existed back then.
Yeah, and again, I'm a history buff anyway.
Sure.
And I got to say, I'm very impressed that for the folks who don't get to see this, he has no notes. He knows this.
I did bring a prop because
I did see that.
So this is something, we talk about record keeping, and so this book is a book that we have in our vault. This book is called the Marks and Brands book. And so if you ran cattle or hogs or sheep or goats in Lake County, you registered your brand or your mark with the clerk's office. And so the first entry in this book is from September 1888. Mr. Duncan signed it, and it is the brand and the mark on the ears of livestock. And this book goes from 1888 until 1946.
Wow.
And we have listed in here, in fact, recently I had a friend of mine ask me, who is a pioneer family in Lake County, if I could find the mark and brands of his family, and I did. They're in this book. And so the index of this book is a series of ear clippings. It literally has drawings of how ears would be clipped for cattle and livestock in this book.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So what kind of storage facility must you have? Because this is it. I'm sure we have digital copies and such nowadays, but
correct.
There's got to be some safeguards.
So for these documents are locked in a vault in the courthouse. That vault is open to the public. So if you wanted to see these books, we would let you see them. We have all of our deed records in that vault, all the original documents, and these were all in today's world, it's electronic copies or photocopies, and these were all hand copied.
Wow.
So if you were the clerk back then or deputy clerk, someone would bring you a deed and you would rewrite the deed in longhand, cursive, if you will,
sure,
in the book. And we have these on file in our vault. All of our records like this now, particularly the deed records, we used to have separate books, deed books, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's simply called the official records book, the OR book. We now go back all the way to those original deeds in 1884. You can see those online. You never have to leave your home. Every deed we have on file, you can look at online.
When we're talking records, what does the clerk encompass? What is the role?
Right. So
of the
we
clerk
are
of circuit courts?
for the court side. We are called the custodian of the record for the court. And there is a definition of custodian of the record found in the rules of court. So there's various rules of court, and we deal mainly with the rules of judicial administration for us. That tells us what our administrative role is with the court. And we are the custodian of every document that comes to the court. We are the custodian of every piece of evidence that comes to the court. And to give you an idea of that volume, last year we had 3 million pages of simply documents filed with us.
And we're talking real paper.
Well,
I mean, not real paper, but I mean,
these days.
But still, it's a record of the documentation.
Correct. So I ask, we have a record storage facility of our older paper records that aren't imaged yet. We've been imaging our documents since 2006. So
are you caught up yet?
Well, no. I mean, every document that came in from 2006 on, we have an image of.
Oh, okay.
We are back imaging. So we are actually going in reverse chronological order with the documents that didn't come in that way. And we are back imaging all of those documents over time. So we are working our way through 2005, then 2004, then 2003.
Gotcha.
So that eventually all of our records will be online just like the deeds, all of the court records. So I asked what that task would entail to the director of our storage facility. And he tells me we have approximately 50 million pages to back image. So it's quite a lot.
50 million.
Correct.
And this requires somebody.
Yes.
To scan
it. Well, not only scan it, but it has to be indexed correctly. It has to be, so we have what we call a progress docket, which is, it tells you everything that went on in the case. So if you think about it, all those progress dockets we already have, and we have to now marry the progress docket with the document for the image so that we have it available to you.
And I've got to ask.
Sure.
How many people do you have doing this?
Unfortunately, not enough.
There's more than one.
It's more than one poor person doing it. Yes.
Because that is a mammoth undertaking.
It is a mammoth undertaking. And if you think about where we've been and where we're headed, so this is on the deed side of the office, if you will, the official record side. On the court side, you would see books like this originally, and then we would migrate into other mediums. So ultimately, we've been through this kind of book. We've been through microfilm, microfiche, green bar paper, index cards.
Of course.
We've been through every medium you can think of. And so one of our big projects right now is getting all those indexes at least on the same medium.
Right.
So that we can marry everything appropriately.
Wow. That really does blow my mind. And though I've said that a couple of times,
Sure.
but I'm thinking, this is a rather large book.
Mm-hmm.
I know of microfiche, and I know that's, especially if the labels have been wearing off and you don't know what it is, you have to look at it, and it's just amazing to me. The amount of record keeping, and I know it sounds like a dull subject,
Right.
but if you really look at it, it's not. I mean, this is Lake County's history.
It is Lake County's history, and that's what's important. So about 2 years ago, let me back up just a little bit. We have the ability to, after certain time periods, to destroy court records. And so,
Okay.
Now having said that, if it's a criminal court record, that time period is 75 years. But
Still a long time.
It's a long time. But some records are shorter in time frame as far as destruction goes. But because it is such an important part, and you don't know what's going to become important. Years ago, I can remember that there was a big write-up in the newspaper about Joe Theismann, who had given a talk in Howland Hills, getting a ticket from the Howland Hills Police Department as he was leaving town. And so it might be interesting to someone to find that ticket.
Right.
So I'm not sure that there's any record that's insignificant, if you will, because it may be insignificant to me, but it may be very significant to someone else.
Well, it was recorded for a reason.
And so about 3 years ago, I put a stop to any of our court records ever being destroyed.
Well, Gary, we need to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'd like to get into your role and how you got into it, and let our audience know a little bit more about you.
Great. Sounds good.
All right. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Radio Waves. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and this is a production of Red Apples Media. Before the break, we were getting maybe a little deeper than Gary wanted to, but I just really found it interesting. Gary, let's talk more modern day.
Sure.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what your role is as the clerk of circuit courts?
So I mentioned the 5 overarching things. So
Yes.
the things that are important for the citizens of Lake County, and probably maybe the most important thing for them to know that we do is that we're the comptroller, and we talked about comptroller. And the comptroller really means we're the CFO for the county. So we're the chief financial officer for the county. A comptroller is typically the chief financial officer of a governmental entity. We do what's called pre-audit accounting, if you will. So we make sure that all the expenditures of the county have been duly budgeted, duly authorized, signed off on before we send out the check. We are not the budget arm of the county. That's separate. We also audit on the backside. We're also the internal auditor. But one of the fascinating facts I find for the citizens of Lake County when I'm talking to them is they don't understand the volume of that money. And so right now, because it is tax paying season for your property taxes, we are currently investing a little over $200 million of your money. And we are also the investment group, if you will, for the county.
Really?
We make those investment decisions. There's an investment policy group. County Commission sets the policy. Then there is a group that makes sure that all of our investments meets that policy, but ultimately the clerk's office makes those investments. And then during the course of any given year, we always pay all the county's bills, but during the course of any given year, currently we're paying about $260 million in bills a year. So over $250 million in bills a
So,
year.
and this all goes through the clerk?
Correct.
So I didn't know that.
It is a very important function, and we use the term fly spec. We fly spec everything that comes through. We make sure that it is an authorized purchase, something that's legal to be purchased, something that's been authorized by the county to be purchased, before we'll cut a check for it. We make sure we have all the accompanying documentary evidence for that.
Okay, well, can you give me an example of something we can spend and something that you've had to say, no, guys?
So if one of my employees went to a conference, for example, and decided to use a county credit card on purchasing food, it's simply not allowed by our policy.
Okay.
They get a per diem for going. They spend their own money. We reimburse them the per diem for the food. They're not allowed to. So if we saw a charge come through on food, we'd say, nope, can't. We're not paying that. You need to pay it. But they can do things like gas cards are issued, and so we expect to see gas being purchased for fleet vehicles and those kind of things. So we make sure that they look normal. If we see a vehicle having been filled up 5 times in a day, we'll investigate that.
Again, I did a little bit of research prior to you coming, and you really oversee a lot of many departments.
I have 14 finance members.
Wow. But again, there's a lot of money. If Lake County's money, we're talking.
Oh, it's the citizens' money.
Well, no, yes,
Absolutely.
I stand corrected.
It's your money.
But you're making sure that it's being spent appropriately.
Correct.
And not for, no, we don't need a hot air balloon with Lake County logo on it.
Correct.
Type of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And look, if the commission decides that as part of a tourism thing that we do need a hot air balloon up one day, and they authorize that expenditure, I don't question that policy. That's not my role. I want to make sure that the hot air balloon ride that comes across the desk was authorized first.
Right.
The commission did say okay. It went through all the appropriate channels, got all the appropriate sign-offs. It's not my role to set the policy for them. That is not what we do.
Okay. Now that's the comptrolling side of it.
Correct.
Okay. How does the clerk's office support the judges? Because it's the clerk of the circuit court, right?
So if you think about it, our citizens, all of our citizens, expect the court to be neutral. That's the reason we have a court. You have a dispute with your neighbor, and you need a neutral party to decide that. You think you haven't committed a crime, and law enforcement thinks you have. You need a neutral party, most times with a jury also, to decide that. So we are the neutral record keeper of all those proceedings, so that we can't have a secret court. We can't have a court that somehow can manipulate those records. So we're not exactly the check and balance, but what we are is we're sort of a guarantor that this system that we have in the United States works. We guarantee that if you give us your evidence, it's not going to disappear. We're the keeper of the evidence. We guarantee that if you give us your documents, they actually do get put in the court file so the judges can really see them, and we're not picking sides. We are the judge's data. So if you think about our records for a moment now, we became the first county in the state of Florida in 2011 to begin accepting electronically filed court records. And it's something called the e-portal. The e-portal now has 193,000 users throughout the state, only 93,000 of which, or 92,000 of which, are lawyers. So we have more non-lawyers using that system than lawyers. And so you can file your documents electronically with us. The only thing that we have to have in paper anymore on the court side are certain sworn documents, mostly from law enforcement, where they're signing an arrest affidavit, those kind of things.
Sure.
We scan those in, and then we warehouse those. We have to keep them that way, and we have to keep wills that way.
Wow. That's
So we basically say to the public, we're a neutral in this battle you're having, just like the judges are a neutral, and we make sure that we protect everything that you send to us and every piece of evidence that the judges take in.
so it truly is a vital role of
It is.
our government system.
It is.
I mean, it really
it's an
is.
absolutely vital role. And we're very much partners with the judges. Lake County has a really nice relationship between the clerk's office and the judicial branch, in that we understand that we don't, either of us, occupy a vacuum and operate in a vacuum. We make sure that we keep each other informed of new technologies. So in order to do the document images, but to not have paper anymore,
Right.
the judges needed some way to see those. And so we bought a thing called a judicial viewer. And so now when you're in court, the judge is not looking at a paper file anymore. The judge is actually looking at a computer screen at all the documents he needs to see. And one of the nice things about that is the judge can look at documents by category. So if he wants to look at every motion that's been filed in your case, he clicks the tab called Motions, and it shows him every motion. If he wants to look at it, and it's a neat system.
No, that expedites.
Correct.
I mean,
And we brought that system online in 2013.
wow.
We were probably the third county in the state to do that.
You know, I try not to take things for granted. And
Right.
I've seen clerk of the circuit courts. Okay,
Right.
yeah, I know what that is, but no,
Right.
I don't. You know, and to see just how important of a role you have in both local as well as
Sure.
the greater scheme of things.
We also issue
Which-
marriage licenses and passports.
I was about to say, you know, speeding tickets, this, that,
Yeah.
whatever the case is,
Right.
you are, I don't want to say the funnel, but the screen maybe, and the record, well, clearly the record keeper.
Sure. In a lot of instances, sometimes it's during the last legislative session, the lawmakers wanted to do certain things. If you remember, right at the end of the session, they passed what we call the gun bill, based on the Parkland shooting. We got a lot of tasks in that bill. Between that bill and Senate Bill 1392, which is a criminal data transparency bill, we received almost 100 new tasks.
New tasks.
Correct. So we have to send out notices a certain way. We have to notify parties a certain way. We have to document certain data and send that on to FDLE. Anytime we have someone who's going through a mental health issue, we have to send that data through a system called MECOM to FDLE so that it can then be passed on so that that person can't get a concealed weapons permit if they're having that issue. So there's a lot of responsibility in our office. We take child support payments. We make sure that those records are up to date.
And again, the things you take for granted, because many of us,
Right.
we all, let's face it, we all go through the system at one point in time or the other.
Sure.
And when I say go through the system, I mean, you know, a speeding ticket or
Sure.
a marriage license or a passport
Sure.
or a speeding ticket
Right.
or.
Right.
And yet, I don't know just how many people can readily describe exactly what your office does. Not just yours, just throughout the country
Sure,
as well.
sure.
You know?
And clerk's offices differ, not so much in the state of Florida, but if you come from a different state, a lot of times it'll be a clerk of a certain court. So we deal all the time with out-of-state requests for records for court proceedings, and many times we're dealing simply with the clerk of the probate court. So all that court does is probate.
Gotcha.
Our office encompasses everything that's in the trial court level.
Everything. How did you get into this?
So I'm a longtime lawyer. I have a degree in accounting, so
Okay.
I sort of fit both roles. I came to Lake County in 1984.
Now, so,
yeah.
so,
I
so
went
you
back.
made-
I went back to the original deeds. I came to Lake County in 1984. My wife and I got married in '84. She was already here. She's a lawyer. We made Lake County our home. I was actually working originally for the largest accounting firm in the world in their branch office in Orlando, and decided to practice law instead of tax accounting, and came back to Lake County. Got a job with a private law firm here in Lake County, and then I got summoned by the chief circuit judge at the time, who asked me to come work for him. You really don't say no to the chief circuit judge.
Right.
And so I worked in the judicial system for a while as the staff attorney for the chief circuit judge. Left there, went back into private practice, and stayed in private practice doing local government law for years and years and years. And in 2011, Neil Kelly, who is my predecessor, called me and asked me if I'd come and be his in-house attorney, number one, and run the day-to-day operation of the clerk's office. And did that, and it's not a job. It's really a love affair. It is a wonderful place to be and a wonderful thing to do. There are always 50 balls in the air.
Oh, I was about to say, sounds like it.
But it's a good fit for me. I love coming into the office every day, and working on all the different things we're fast approaching. We're trying to engage. We're trying to innovate every day, which means new technology for us all the time.
We're running real short on time,
Sure.
but where do you see the office in the future?
So
Talking about technology and how things always
so
change.
we've hired a robot. So I'm literally going to have in January a robot testing in our office. Putting on arrest affidavits.
So almost like a RoboCop.
Well, it's not a physical
Can we-
robot, it's a
can we-
software robot, but he actually gets a workstation,
Okay.
and he actually types things into our database.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's cool.
And that'll be much more efficient for the office. One of the other things that we are doing in the very near future to make it much easier on our customers, if you think about our customers, if they have to pay a court fine, they're really not happy about having to pay it in the first place.
Sure.
And they don't want to have to drive from South Lake to the main courthouse, even to our branch office. We have two branch offices, one in South Lake and one in North Lake. So we're trying to make it easier for them to do business with us. So we have signed a contract with a vendor who is going to allow them to make anything they need to pay us by credit card. And one of the really cool features of this is it will also allow them, if they are a cash basis person, if they only, and I have employees
Sure.
who don't use credit cards, it will allow them to get a barcode from our system, take that barcode to a local store like a CVS. A CVS is one of their clients.
Okay.
Show the barcode, and the barcode will tell the CVS clerk how much money they're supposed to hand the CVS clerk for us. They will literally hand them the cash, and that'll get into our system within a few hours, and they will be paid as far as we're concerned.
Wow. That's technology. We're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, innovation and technology,
Yeah.
they're separate. They go hand in hand for the most
course.
part, but we are driving to make things more efficient for the office, much more efficient for the customer, and much more convenient for the customer.
And we are the customers.
You are the customers.
Well, Gary, thank you so much. It's all the time we have for today.
Sure.
I'd love to have you back on maybe in the future. Really.
Absolutely. Feel free.
Great. So that wraps up our show today. Again, I'm your host, Kris Poliquin, and we'll see you next time.